She checked yes on the Rsvp. The Millionaire CEO didn't expect a +1 with his eyes. The crystal champagne flute slips from Dorian Hale's fingers. It shatters against the marble floor of the grand ballroom, the sound somehow cutting through the elegant music, the polite conversation, the carefully orchestrated perfection of the evening. But Dorian didn't notice. He didn't hear the gasps from nearby guests or see his assistant rushing toward him with napkins. His entire world has narrowed to a single point of focus at the entrance of the ballroom. Janelle Ward stood before him, elegant in a simple midnight blue dress, her hair swept up to reveal the graceful neck he once knew by heart. She is exactly as beautiful as he remembers, perhaps more so. Time has only refined her quiet confidence, her natural grace. But it's not Janelle who has caused the room to still, the conversations to falter, the cameras to swivel. It's the small figure beside her. A boy, perhaps 7 years old, dressed in a carefully pressed suit that can't quite contain his childish energy. His hand is clasped firmly in Janelle's, his eyes wide as he takes in the glittering scene before him. Eyes that are unmistakably, undeniably Dorian's own. Storm gray. Intense. Questioning. The exact shade and shape that has stared back at Dorian for mirrors his entire life. The Hale family trait that journalists have commented on, that business rivals have learned to fear, that board members have come to respect. Now reflected in miniature, in a child he never knew existed. Mr. Hale. His assistant's voice seems to come from miles away. Sir, are you all right? Dorian couldn't answer. Couldn't move. Couldn't process the truth that has walked through his carefully guarded door. Across the room, Janelle's eyes meet his. No apology. No explanation. Just a quiet certainty that says, this moment was always coming. And in the heartbeat of silence before the whispers begin, before the phones start capturing what will undoubtedly become tomorrow's headline, Dorian Hale, celebrated CEO, business visionary, man who has controlled every aspect of his life for 8 years, faced the one consequence he never anticipated. His son. 8 years earlier, Janelle Ward's life looked nothing like the quiet, structured existence she'd built for herself and Kai. Back then, she'd been ambitious, driven, a brilliant marketing strategist whose innovative campaigns had caught the attention of the rising tech world. Including Dorian Hale, the intense young founder of Hale Innovations. Their first meeting wasn't romantic. It was contentious, challenging. A conference room debate over brand positioning that left other executives shifting uncomfortably as Janelle systematically dismantled Dorian's proposed strategy. Your approach prioritizes flash over substance, she'd argued, unintimidated by his reputation or the power he wielded. You're selling the sizzle when your actual product is the most impressive steak on the market. Instead of the anger everyone expected, Dorian had studied her with those penetrating gray eyes, a slow smile spreading across his face. You're absolutely right, he'd said finally. And I want you leading our marketing division. The job offer was unexpected. Tempting. Potentially career-defining. But Janelle had principles that mattered more than opportunity. I don't work for companies I believe in, she'd replied. I partner with them. My agency maintains independence or we don't engage. It was a risk, turning down what could have been a lucrative position with the industry's rising star. But Janelle had built her reputation on integrity and independent thinking. She wouldn't compromise that, not even for Dorian Hale. To everyone's surprise, Dorian had laughed, a genuine sound rarely heard in corporate settings. Partnership it is, then. I respect people who stand their ground, Ms. Ward. Especially when they're right. That was the beginning. Not of their romance. That would come later, gradually, inevitably, but of a professional relationship built on mutual respect and intellectual challenge. Janelle's agency became Hale Innovations' primary marketing partner. She attended strategy meetings, helped shape product launches, became an essential voice in Dorian's rapidly expanding world. For 6 months, they maintained a strictly professional connection, though the chemistry between them was obvious to everyone. The way they finished each other's sentences in meetings. The late-night strategy sessions that somehow evolved into conversations about books, music, childhood dreams. The undeniable energy that filled any room they occupied together. "You should just ask her out," Dorian's COO had suggested after watching another meeting where their eyes held a beat too long. "The tension is distracting the entire executive team." "It's complicated," Dorian had replied. "She's not just another woman. She's important. To the company." "To the company," his friend had repeated skeptically. Right. The truth was more complex. Dorian had built his life around control, around calculated risks and strategic moves. Nothing in his carefully constructed world was unplanned. But his feelings for Janelle, they existed outside his careful equations. They were organic, unpredictable, potentially disruptive. And for a man whose childhood had been defined by chaos and uncertainty, whose adult success had been built on meticulous order, disruption was terrifying. It was Janelle who finally bridged the gap. After a particularly successful product launch, as they stood on the rooftop of the venue watching the city lights below, she turned to him with characteristic directness. "We should stop pretending," she'd said simply. "Pretending what?" Dorian had asked, though he knew exactly what she meant. "That this is just professional. That we don't both feel something more." She'd met his gaze steadily. "Life's too short for unnecessary complications, Dorian. Either we explore this or we don't. But the limbo is exhausting." Her honesty had cut through his hesitation. In that moment, looking at her illuminated by city lights, Dorian had made a rare impulsive decision. He'd kissed her. Not tentatively. Not cautiously. But with all the intensity and focus he brought to everything that mattered to him. And Janelle had matched him, strength for strength, passion for passion. It was the beginning of the most authentic relationship either had ever experienced. Challenging, consuming, occasionally combustible, but always real. Janelle didn't defer to Dorian's position or wealth. Dorian didn't try to control or direct her as he did most aspects of his life. They existed in a rare space of equality and mutual respect. For nearly 2 years, they built something that seemed unbreakable. Janelle became not just Dorian's partner but his anchor, the person who reminded him of the humanity behind his ambition, who loved the man beneath the CEO title. And Dorian showed Janelle a world beyond her careful boundaries, encouraged her to dream bigger, to trust her instincts, to embrace the brilliance she often downplayed. They complemented each other perfectly. Her groundedness balanced his intensity. His vision expanded her horizons. Together, they seemed unstoppable. Until Hale Innovations landed its first major international contract. If you're already feeling the tension building in this story, take a moment to like and subscribe. The most powerful narratives are those where past choices create present consequences, and we're just getting started. The Nakamura deal changed everything. A $300 million partnership with Japan's largest tech conglomerate that would put Hale Innovations on the global map. The board was ecstatic. Investors were jubilant. The press hailed it as Dorian's breakthrough moment. But with elevated success came elevated scrutiny. Suddenly, Dorian's life wasn't just his own. Financial analysts dissected his every decision. Competitors watched for any sign of weakness. The board, sensing the company's potential for explosive growth, began pushing for a more corporate approach to leadership. Image matters now more than ever, the chairman had explained during a particularly tense meeting. We're not a scrappy startup anymore. We're playing in the big leagues. The pressure mounted gradually. First came suggestions about Dorian's public appearances. Then his wardrobe. Then his living arrangements. Each recommendation framed as necessary for the company's continued success. Janelle watched with growing concern as the authentic, passionate man she loved was slowly reshaped into a corporate figurehead. His schedule became increasingly dominated by investor meetings and press appearances. Their time together grew fragmented, interrupted by constant calls and emails. "This will settle down," Dorian assured her late one night, as they lay in bed with his laptop still open beside them, emails pinging relentlessly. "Once the Nakamura integration is complete. Once the next funding round closes. Once the board sees the third quarter numbers." But Janelle, with her marketer's eye for patterns, recognized the truth. There would always be another milestone, another goal post, another reason for temporary sacrifice. The breaking point came unexpectedly. A photo of them at dinner, Dorian laughing openly at something Janelle had said, his guard completely down. Nothing scandalous. Nothing inappropriate. Just a man clearly in love, momentarily unburdened by the weight of his responsibilities. The board's reaction was swift and severe. "This isn't the image we need right now," the chairman had said, sliding the tabloid across the conference table. "You look distracted." "I was having dinner with my girlfriend," Dorian had replied, an edge creeping into his voice. "That's hardly front-page news. It is when you're the face of a company on the verge of going public." The chairman's tone was measured but firm. "Investors need to see focus, discipline, unwavering commitment. Not this." The conversation that followed was clinical, strategic, entirely focused on optics and investor confidence. No one explicitly told Dorian to end his relationship with Janelle. That would have been too direct, too actionable. Instead, they planted seeds of doubt, framed their concerns in terms of company valuation and market perception. By the time Dorian left that meeting, something fundamental had shifted in his thinking. The clarity he'd found with Janelle was clouded by doubt, by the weight of responsibility to his company, his employees, his vision. That night, he arrived at Janelle's apartment late. She was already in bed, reading, her face lighting up when he entered, then falling as she registered his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting aside her book. Dorian stood at the foot of the bed, unable to sit, unable to soften what he'd convinced himself was necessary. "We need to talk about us," he began, his voice taking on the same tone he used in difficult business negotiations. "About the future." Janelle sat up straighter, instantly alert to the shift in his demeanor. "Okay. The company is at a critical juncture. The IPO preparation, the Nakamura integration, the European expansion, it's all happening simultaneously." He paced as he spoke, not quite meeting her eyes. "I need to be completely focused. Completely committed. And you think I'm preventing that?" Janelle asked quietly. "Not intentionally," Dorian clarified quickly. "But the reality is, any serious relationship requires time, energy, attention. Resources I can't divide right now." Janelle was silent for a long moment, studying him with the perceptiveness that had always seen through his carefully constructed facades. "This isn't you talking," she said finally. "This is the board. The investors. The people who see me as a liability rather than the person who helps you remember why you started this company in the first place." Dorian flinched slightly at her accuracy. "It's more complicated than that." "Actually, it's very simple," Janelle countered, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "You're choosing the company over us. Over me. It's not a choice. It's a temporary necessity." Even as he said the words, Dorian recognized their hollowness. "Once we're through this phase. There will be another phase," Janelle finished for him. "Another reason why now isn't the right time. Another justification for putting everything else on hold." She rose from the bed, wrapped her robe more tightly around herself, a small, protective gesture that made Dorian's chest ache. "I love you, Dorian. I believe in you and what you're building. But I won't be shelved like a project that's inconvenient to your current priorities." Her voice remained calm, dignified, though tears shimmered in her eyes. If you walk out that door with this decision, don't expect me to be waiting when you decide the timing is finally right. It was a moment of choice. A crossroads where Dorian could have recognized the true cost of what he was sacrificing. Could have remembered that success without someone to share it with was a hollow victory. Instead, he straightened his shoulders, retreated behind the corporate mask that had become increasingly comfortable. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "This is how it has to be." He didn't wait for her response. Didn't allow himself to see the devastation his words had caused. He turned and walked out, telling himself it was temporary, necessary, the responsible choice. It was the last time he saw her. Until tonight. If this emotional turning point has touched your heart, please comment below with your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose between professional success and personal happiness? What would you have done in Dorian or Janelle's position? What Dorian couldn't know, what Janelle herself didn't know on that painful night, was that their story had only reached intermission, not conclusion. 3 weeks after their breakup, as Dorian immersed himself in IPO preparations and Janelle threw herself into work to numb the heartache, she discovered she was pregnant. The revelation came on a Tuesday morning. 2 pink lines on a plastic stick that changed everything. Janelle sat on her bathroom floor for hours, alternating between shock, fear, and a strange, unexpected joy that bubbled beneath the practical concerns. A baby. Their baby. Her first instinct was to call Dorian immediately. Despite everything, despite the painful way things had ended, he deserved to know. Had a right to be part of this decision, this future. She got as far as picking up her phone, his number still at the top of her recent calls. Then she saw the headline on her news app. Hale Innovations announces IPO date, CEO Dorian Hale poised to become tech's newest billionaire. The accompanying photo showed Dorian at a press conference, immaculate in a tailored suit, his expression confident, controlled, every inch the corporate visionary. Beside him stood the board chairman, beaming with pride at their rising star. Reality crashed down around Janelle with brutal clarity. This was the world Dorian had chosen. A world of shareholders and market valuations, of carefully managed public perception and strategic decisions. A world where a surprise pregnancy would be viewed as a complication, a potential PR issue to be managed. She placed her phone down, both hands moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. "It's just us," she whispered to the life growing inside her. "And that's going to be okay." The decision wasn't made lightly. For days, Janelle wrestled with the ethics, the implications, the long-term consequences. She made lists of pros and cons, scenarios and contingencies, applying her strategic mind to the most personal decisions she would ever make. In the end, it came down to a simple truth. She refused to bring a child into a world where they would be seen as an inconvenience, a distraction from more important matters. Refused to watch her baby's milestones be missed because of board meetings and investor calls. Refused to subject a child to the public scrutiny and corporate politics that had ultimately destroyed her relationship with Dorian. If she told him, one of 2 things would happen: either he would reject his own child as another complication in his carefully managed life, or he would try to incorporate fatherhood into his corporate image. The CEO with the perfect family to complement his perfect success story. Neither option felt right. Neither honored the innocent life she carried. So Janelle made the hardest choice of her life: she would raise this child alone. Would give them a life of authenticity and presence rather than image and absence. Would protect them from becoming a footnote in Dorian Hale's carefully curated biography. 2 weeks later, she closed her marketing agency, referring clients to trusted colleagues. Liquidated her investments. Packed what mattered and sold what didn't. And moved 3,000 miles away, to a small coastal town where no one had heard of Hale Innovations or its charismatic CEO. She changed her last name back to her mother's maiden name, Ward, and built a new life centered around the child growing inside her. Found work as a marketing consultant for local businesses. Bought a small cottage near the beach. created a world as different from Dorian's high-pressure existence as possible. Kai Ward was born on a stormy April morning, entering the world with a lusty cry and eyes that, even in those first moments, held the unmistakable Hale intensity. "He's perfect," the nurse had said, placing him in Janelle's arms. And he was. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and those eyes, storm gray and already alert, taking in the world with a focus that made Janelle's heart clench with recognition. In those first moments, holding her son, Janelle experienced a complex wave of emotions. Joy, overwhelming and pure. Love, instant and all-consuming. And grief, for the father who didn't know his son existed, for the family that might have been under different circumstances. But as Kai's tiny hand wrapped around her finger, as his eyes locked with hers in that mysterious newborn gaze, Janelle made a silent promise: this child would never doubt his worth. Would never feel like an inconvenience or an afterthought. Would be the center of a world built on presence rather than ambition. "It's you and me, little one," she whispered. "And we're going to be just fine." The years that followed proved her right. Janelle built a life that was modest but rich in the ways that mattered. Her remote consulting work provided enough income for their needs while allowing her the flexibility to be present for every milestone in Kai's life. First smile, first steps, first words. She created a home filled with books and art and music, with beach walks and stargazing and impromptu dance parties in the kitchen. And Kai thrived. Grew from a curious baby into a thoughtful toddler and then an extraordinary little boy. By age 7, he was reading at a 5th grade level, building complex Lego structures without instructions, asking questions that sometimes left Janelle searching for answers. Why is the sky blue but the ocean only sometimes blue? How do airplanes stay up when they're so heavy? If trees make oxygen and we need oxygen to live, why do people cut down forests? His mind worked in fascinating ways, analytical yet creative, logical yet intuitive. Just like his father's. The resemblance went beyond intellectual curiosity. As Kai grew, Dorian's features emerged more distinctly in his small face, the sharp jawline softened by childhood roundness, the intense focus when something captured his interest, the slight furrow between his brows when he concentrated. Even his mannerisms sometimes gave Janelle déjà vu, the way he tilted his head when considering a problem, the unconscious tapping of fingers when thinking deeply, the rare but transformative full smile that changed his entire face. "You look just like your daddy," Janelle told him once, when he caught her staring. "I do." Kai had perked up immediately. Information about his father was rare and precious. "What else do I get from him?" Janelle had considered carefully, wanting to be honest without revealing too much. "Your curiosity. Your determination. The way you never give up when something interests you." "Is he smart like me?" "Very smart," Janelle confirmed. "One of the smartest people I've ever known." "Then why isn't he here?" The question was direct, innocent, devastating in its simplicity. Janelle had prepared for this moment, had rehearsed explanations that were age-appropriate and honest without being hurtful. Sometimes grown-ups make choices about what's most important to them. "Your daddy chose his work. I chose you. Doesn't he know about me?" The question she dreaded most. The one that forced her to either lie directly or admit to a choice that Kai might someday view as unfair. To both himself and his father. "No, sweetheart," she'd answered, choosing truth over comfort. "He doesn't know about you." "Why not?" "Because sometimes adults make complicated decisions that they think are best at the time." She'd stroked his hair, so like Dorian's in texture and color. "When your daddy and I separated, I decided that giving you a peaceful, stable life was the most important thing. I was afraid that wouldn't be possible in his world." Kai had considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important matters. Could we tell him now? The hope in his voice had nearly broken her. "Maybe someday," she'd said, unable to crush that hope entirely. "When the time is right." She hadn't known then how soon, someday, would arrive. Hadn't imagined that fate would force her hand through a gold-embossed invitation and a handwritten note from the man she'd left behind. For 7 years, Janelle had successfully kept their worlds separate. Had built a life where Dorian Hale existed only in occasional news articles she quickly scrolled past, in the features of the son he didn't know, in memories she allowed herself to revisit only in unguarded moments. She'd watched from a distance as Hale Innovations grew into the tech giant Dorian had always envisioned. Had seen his face on magazine covers, his name on lists of the most influential business leaders, his success expanding exactly as he'd planned. He'd achieved everything he'd sacrificed their relationship for. Everything he'd believed mattered most. And Janelle had found her own version of success. Not measured in market share or stock options, but in Kai's confident smile, in the community they'd built in their small coastal town, in the balance she'd created between meaningful work and present parenthood. Their separate paths seemed destined to continue that way indefinitely. Until the invitation arrived. If this story of choices, consequences, and unexpected reunions has captured your imagination, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more emotionally rich narratives to life. The Hale Innovations annual Founders Celebration was legendary in tech circles, an exclusive gala marking the company's founding, attended by industry leaders, investors, and carefully selected guests. Invitations were coveted, appearances noted, connections made that shaped the industry's direction for the coming year. Janelle knew about the event, of course. It was impossible to work in marketing, even remotely, without hearing about the most prestigious gathering in the tech calendar. But she'd never imagined receiving an invitation. Had never considered the possibility of re-entering Dorian's world, even for a single evening. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, mixed with bills and local flyers. Heavy cream paper, gold embossing, her name and address written in elegant calligraphy. Janelle stared at it for a long moment before opening it, her fingers suddenly clumsy with unexpected nerves. Inside was exactly what she'd expected, a formal invitation to the gala, scheduled for 3 weeks hence at the Grand Meridian Hotel in San Francisco. What she hadn't expected was the small card tucked behind it, simple white cardstock with a handwritten note in the distinctive, precise handwriting she still remembered from birthday cards and impromptu love notes left on her pillow. Janelle. It's been a long time. If you can attend. I would like to speak with you. DH. 7 words and initials. Neutral, polite, revealing nothing of the writer's intentions or emotions. Yet they sent Janelle's heart racing, her mind spinning with questions. How had he found her? Why now, after 7 years of silence? What could he possibly want to discuss after all this time? Mom. What's that? Kai's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood beside her at the kitchen counter, school backpack already on, curious eyes fixed on the elegant invitation. It's an invitation, Janelle explained, trying to keep her voice casual. To a fancy party. Like with princesses? Kai asked, his 7-year-old mind making the most obvious connection to formal events. Janelle smiled despite her inner turmoil. Not quite. It's a business event. 4 grown-ups. Oh. Kai's interest visibly dimmed, then rekindled as he spotted the gold embossing. It looks important. It's just a party, Janelle said, attempting to downplay its significance. She slipped the personal note into her pocket, out of Kai's sight. But her son, with his father's perceptiveness, wasn't so easily diverted. Are you going to go? The question gave Janelle pause. Was she? Should she? The rational answer seemed obvious, no. There was nothing to be gained from reopening old wounds, from facing Dorian after all these years. Their chapter had ended. They had both moved on. Except they hadn't, not completely. Because Kai existed. Because every day, Janelle looked into eyes that belonged to a man who didn't know he was a father. Because her son was growing increasingly curious about his origins, his identity, the half of himself that remained a mystery. I don't know, she answered honestly. It's far away, and it's during your school week. Where is it? Kai asked, his interest fully engaged now. San Francisco. I've never been to San Francisco, Kai said, excitement building in his voice. We could see the Golden Gate Bridge. And Alcatraz. And those cable cars that go up and down the hills. Janelle hadn't considered the possibility of taking Kai with her. Had automatically assumed that if, a very big if, she decided to attend, she would go alone. Face Dorian, hear whatever he had to say, and return to their carefully constructed life. But Kai's enthusiasm gave her pause. Made her consider another possibility. A bolder one. You want to go with me? She asked carefully. To San Francisco? Yes. Kai's face lit up. Can I? Please. It would mean missing a few days of school, Janelle cautioned. And the party itself might be boring for you. I don't care, Kai insisted. I've never been to a fancy party. Or a big city. Or on an airplane. His excitement built with each new realization. Please, Mom. Please, can we go? Looking at her son's hopeful face, at Dorian's eyes shining with excitement, Dorian's features animated with anticipation, Janelle felt something shift inside her. A recognition that perhaps fate was offering an opportunity she hadn't allowed herself to consider. The truth had remained buried for 7 years. Maybe it was time for it to be known. Let me think about it, she said, not committing but not refusing either. It's a big decision. Kai nodded solemnly, recognizing the significance of her not saying no outright. Okay. But I hope we can go. As he headed off to school, Janelle remained at the counter, staring at the invitation. At the RSVP card with its simple options. Attending, yes/no. +1. Such a small space to write a name that would change everything. For 3 days, Janelle deliberated. Made lists of pros and cons, imagined scenarios and outcomes. Considered what was best for Kai, for herself, even for Dorian. The arguments against attending were logical, practical, compelling. The potential emotional toll of seeing Dorian again. The disruption to Kai's routine and schooling. The inevitable questions and complications that would follow. The uncertainty of how Dorian would react to discovering he had a son. But beneath these rational concerns, other thoughts persisted. Less practical, more emotional, equally powerful, Kai's growing curiosity about his father. The burden of carrying such a significant secret alone. The reality that Kai would eventually need more answers than she could provide. The possibility that Dorian, despite his past choices, deserved to know his son. On the 4th morning, as Janelle prepared Kai's lunch for school, he asked the question that had clearly been on his mind since the invitation arrived. Mom. Have you decided about the fancy party yet? Janelle looked at her son, this extraordinary child who carried half of Dorian in his DNA, in his features, in his brilliant mind. This boy who deserved to know his full identity, his complete heritage. This innocent who had never asked to be born into complicated adult decisions and consequences. I'm still thinking about it, she said carefully. Is it because of money? Kai asked, practical even at 7. Because I could use my birthday money from Grandma if that helps. The offer, so earnest and generous, made Janelle's heart ache. No, sweetheart. It's not about money. Then what is it about? How to explain the complex web of history, emotion, and consequence that surrounded this decision. How to make a 7-year-old understand the potential life-changing implications of what seemed to him like a simple trip to see a bridge and attend a party. It's complicated, Janelle began, then stopped herself. She'd always been honest with Kai, had never talked down to him or oversimplified important matters. He deserved the same respect now. The truth is, the person who invited us is someone from my past. Someone important. Kai's eyes widened with sudden understanding. Is it my dad? Is he the one who sent the invitation? The perceptiveness took Janelle's breath away. Yes, she admitted. It is. Then we have to go. Kai exclaimed, jumping up from his chair. We have to go right now. It's not that simple, Kai, Janelle cautioned, though her resolve was weakening in the face of his excitement. Your father doesn't know about you. Finding out this way would be a big shock for him. But don't you think he should know? Kai asked, his expression suddenly serious beyond his years. Don't you think he might want to meet me? The question hung in the air between them, impossible to dismiss, impossible to answer with certainty. Because the truth was, Janelle didn't know. Couldn't know how Dorian would react to discovering he had a son. Whether he would embrace fatherhood or see it as another complication in his carefully managed life. But looking at Kai, at the hope in his eyes, the questions that would only grow more pressing as he got older, Janelle recognized that the time for protection through silence had passed. Yes, she said finally. I think he should know about you. And I think you deserve to know him. Kai's face lit up with joy so pure it brought tears to Janelle's eyes. So we're going. Really going? Yes, Janelle confirmed, the decision crystallizing even as she spoke. We're going. That evening, after Kai was asleep, Janelle sat at her small desk with the RSVP card before her. Such a simple act, checking a box, writing a name, yet it would irrevocably change 3 lives. With steady hands that belied her inner turmoil, she marked the yes box. Then, in the space 4+1, she wrote in clear, deliberate letters. Kai Ward. She sealed the envelope. Addressed it to the response card's destination. Applied a stamp. And before she could reconsider, walked to the mailbox at the end of her driveway and sent it on its way. The die was cast. The truth was in motion. In 3 weeks, Dorian Hale would come face to face with the son he never knew existed. And the woman who had kept that truth from him for 7 years. Whatever happened next was beyond Janelle's control. All she could do was prepare herself and Kai for the moment that would change everything. If this pivotal decision has you on the edge of your seat, wondering how Dorian will react to discovering his son, please share this video with others who appreciate stories about choices, consequences, and the courage it takes to face the truth. Your shares help our storytelling reach those who need it most. The 3 weeks before the gala passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Practical matters provided welcome distraction from the emotional storm brewing beneath the surface, flights to book, hotel reservations to make, appropriate attire to purchase for both herself and Kai. Do I need a tuxedo? Kai asked seriously as they browsed a department store for suitable clothes. Like James Bond? Not quite that formal, Janelle smiled. But you do need to look very nice. This is an important event. They settled on a child-sized navy suit that made Kai look heartbreakingly like a miniature version of his father. When he stood before the fitting room mirror, straightening his shoulders in unconscious imitation of a man he'd never met, Janelle had to turn away to hide the sudden tears that sprang to her eyes. For herself, she chose a simple midnight blue dress, elegant but understated. She wasn't attending to make a statement or to recapture Dorian's attention. This wasn't about them, about what might have been. It was about Kai. About truth. About doing what was right, however belatedly. As their departure date approached, Janelle realized she needed to prepare Kai more thoroughly for what lay ahead. One evening, after dinner, she sat him down for a conversation more serious than any they'd had before. I need to tell you more about your father, she began carefully. About who he is and what to expect when you meet him. Kai nodded solemnly, sensing the importance of the moment. Is he nice? Such a simple question, yet so difficult to answer. Dorian Hale was many things, brilliant, driven, complex. But nice wasn't a word that naturally associated with him. He's intense, Janelle said finally. Very smart. Very focused. He runs a large company that makes technology used by people all over the world. Is he famous? Kai asked, eyes widening. In certain circles, yes. People in the business world know who he is. Janelle hesitated, then decided Kai needed to understand the full context. His name is Dorian Hale. He's the founder and CEO of Hale Innovations. Kai's eyes widened further. Hale. Like my middle name? Janelle nodded. She'd given Kai the middle name Hale, a small acknowledgement of his heritage, a connection to the father he didn't know. Yes, exactly like that. I named you Kai Hale Ward so you would always carry a piece of both of us. Kai Hale, he repeated, testing how it sounded. Kai Hale. A smile spread across his face. I like it. There's something else you should know, Janelle continued, choosing her words carefully. At this party, there will be many important people. Reporters. Photographers. When they see you with your father, they might get very excited. Why? Because you look so much like him, Janelle explained. And because Dorian Hale having a son he didn't know about, that will be big news to them. Kai considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important matters. Will that make him mad? That everyone will know. The question revealed a sensitivity, an emotional intelligence that sometimes surprised Janelle coming from someone so young. I don't know, she answered honestly. He might be shocked. He might be upset with me for not telling him about you sooner. He might need time to process everything. But he won't be mad at me, right? Kai's voice held a note of vulnerability that broke Janelle's heart. It's not my fault he didn't know. No, sweetheart, Janelle assured him, pulling him into a tight hug. None of this is your fault. And no matter how your father reacts, it won't be because of anything you did or didn't do. This is between grown-ups. Kai nodded against her shoulder, then pulled back to ask the question that clearly worried him most. What if he doesn't like me? The fear, so fundamental, so universal, made Janelle's throat tighten with emotion. Kai, listen to me. Anyone who truly knows you can't help but love you. You are smart and kind and wonderful in every way. If your father takes the time to know you, he will see that. And if for some reason he doesn't. She took a deep breath. Then that's his loss. Not yours. Never yours. Kai seemed to accept this, though a shadow of worry remained in his eyes. Can I bring my space book? To show him? Mom says I'm good at astronomy like him. Of course you can, Janelle agreed, relieved by this shift to more practical concerns. That's a wonderful idea. As their conversation continued, as Kai's questions moved from the emotional to the logistical, would there be other kids at the party? What kind of food would they serve? Could he try riding a cable car? Janelle felt both relief and apprehension. Relief that her son seemed to be processing the situation with his characteristic resilience. Apprehension about the moment that loomed before them, the collision of past and present, of secrets and truths, of choices and consequences. Because despite her careful preparation, despite her rational planning, one enormous unknown remained. How would Dorian Hale react to discovering he was a father? The man she had known 8 years ago had been brilliant but rigid, visionary but controlled, capable of great passion but also of cold calculation when his goals were at stake. The man who existed now, the billionaire CEO, the tech visionary, the public figure, was someone she knew only through occasional news articles and business profiles. Had success softened or hardened him? Had achievement brought fulfillment or merely the hunger for more? Had the passing years granted perspective or reinforced the single-minded focus that had once cost them their relationship? These questions haunted Janelle as she packed their suitcases, as she arranged for a neighbor to water her plants, as she confirmed their flight details and hotel reservation. The practical preparations she could control. The emotional outcome remained entirely unpredictable. The morning of their departure dawned clear and bright. Kai woke early, too excited to sleep, bouncing with anticipation about his first airplane ride, his first visit to a major city, his first meeting with the father he'd wondered about his entire life. "Do you think he knows we're coming?" Kai asked as they drove to the airport. "Did you tell him?" "I sent an RSVP," Janelle explained. "It said I was attending and bringing you as my +1. But it didn't explain who you are." "So it's a surprise," Kai concluded, his expression a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "A big surprise." "Yes," Janelle confirmed. "A very big surprise." The flight to San Francisco passed uneventfully, Kai's face pressed to the window for most of the journey, his excitement about the clouds and the tiny buildings below providing welcome distraction from Janelle's growing anxiety. They checked into their hotel. Modest but comfortable, within their budget but still close enough to the Grand Meridian where the gala would be held. "Can we explore?" Kai asked immediately, dropping his small suitcase on the hotel bed. "Can we see the bridge? And the sea lions? And the crooked street?" Janelle checked her watch. The gala wasn't until the following evening. They had time. "Yes, let's explore. But first, let's get some lunch. I'm starving after that flight." The next 24 hours became a whirlwind tour of San Francisco's highlights, cable car rides that made Kai squeal with delight, sea lions barking at Pier 39, the majestic span of the Golden Gate Bridge emerging from wisps of fog. They ate sourdough bread bowls filled with clam chowder, watched street performers in Union Square, and climbed what felt like 1,000 hills. It was a perfect day. Mother and son, exploring and laughing, creating memories untainted by the uncertainty that awaited them. If Janelle sometimes fell quiet, lost in thoughts of what tomorrow might bring, Kai's enthusiasm quickly pulled her back to the present moment, to the joy of experiencing a new city through his eager eyes. That night, as she tucked him into the hotel bed, Kai asked the question that had clearly been on his mind throughout their adventures. "Mom, are you scared about tomorrow?" Janelle considered deflecting, offering reassurance, protecting him from her own anxiety. But she had always been honest with her son, had never underestimated his emotional intelligence or his capacity to handle difficult truths. "Yes," she admitted. "A little scared. A little nervous. A little hopeful." "Me too," Kai confessed. "What if he doesn't want to be my dad?" The vulnerability in his voice made Janelle's heart ache. She sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his dark hair. "So like Dorian's, away from his forehead. Listen to me, Kai. You are the most amazing person I know. You are smart and kind and brave and wonderful. Any father would be lucky to have you as a son. If Dorian doesn't see that immediately, it's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's because grown-ups sometimes take time to adjust to big changes." Kai nodded, processing this. "But we'll still be okay, right? You and me. Even if he doesn't want us." "We will always be okay," Janelle promised, her voice fierce with conviction. "You and me. No matter what happens tomorrow or any other day. That's the one thing you never have to worry about." Kai's smile was small but genuine. "Okay. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in the world." As Kai drifted to sleep, Janelle remained awake, staring out the hotel window at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Dorian Hale was preparing for his company's gala. Reviewing speeches perhaps, or finalizing details, or meeting with executives and investors. Completely unaware that in less than 24 hours, his carefully constructed world would be forever altered by the existence of a 7-year-old boy with his eyes, his jaw, his brilliant mind. A son he never knew he had. A truth that could no longer remain hidden. The day of the gala dawned with a nervous energy that permeated their hotel room. Kai was uncharacteristically quiet as they ate breakfast, his usual stream of questions and observations replaced by thoughtful silence. "Penny for your thoughts," Janelle said, trying to keep her tone light. Kai looked up from his pancakes. I'm practicing what to say when I meet him. Oh. And what have you decided? I think just, hello, I'm Kai, is good, he said seriously. Simple but polite. That's what you always say is best when meeting someone important. The simplicity of his approach, the earnestness with which he was preparing for this momentous meeting, made Janelle's throat tighten with emotion. That sounds perfect. They spent the day with careful preparations, a late breakfast that would tide them through the evening, a quiet afternoon reading books in the hotel room to conserve energy, an early dinner at a casual restaurant near their hotel. As evening approached, they began the transformation from tourists to gala attendees. Janelle helped Kai with his suit, adjusting his tie, making sure his shirt was properly tucked in. He stood patiently through her ministrations, unusually solemn. You look very handsome, she told him, stepping back to admire the result. Very grown up. You look pretty, Mom, he replied, watching as she applied minimal makeup, arranged her hair in a simple updo. Like a princess. Thank you, sweetheart. Janelle smoothed her midnight blue dress, checking her reflection one final time. Not to impress Dorian, that ship had sailed long ago, but to ensure she projected the confidence and composure she would need for the evening ahead. At precisely 7 o'clock, they stepped into a taxi for the short ride to the Grand Meridian Hotel. Kai's eyes widened as they approached the magnificent building, its facade illuminated with subtle lighting, a red carpet extending from the entrance where elegantly dressed attendees were already arriving. It looks like a castle, he whispered, pressing his face to the window. It's just a hotel, Janelle reminded him gently. A fancy one, but still just a building. As their taxi pulled up to the entrance, as a doorman opened their door with a courteous nod, as they stepped onto the red carpet that would lead them into Dorian's world, Janelle felt a moment of pure panic. Was this a mistake? Was she about to hurt Kai by subjecting him to a public revelation that should have been handled privately? Was she being selfish, using her son to force a confrontation she should have initiated years ago? But then Kai's small hand slipped into hers, warm and trusting. He looked up at her with Dorian's eyes, with absolute faith that she would guide him through this unfamiliar territory. Ready? He asked, his voice steady despite the enormity of the moment before them. Janelle took a deep breath, squeezed his hand, and made her choice. Ready. Together, they walked into the Grand Meridian Hotel, toward the ballroom where Dorian Hale was celebrating his company's success, completely unaware that his greatest legacy was about to walk through the door. If you're feeling the tension building toward this life-changing moment, please like and subscribe to our channel. The most powerful reunions are those we never saw coming, and Dorian Hale is about to face the consequence of choices made 8 years ago. The Grand Meridian's ballroom was a masterpiece of elegant design, soaring ceilings with crystal chandeliers, marble columns, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. For tonight's event, it had been transformed into a showcase of Hale Innovation's success. Subtle branding elements incorporated into the decor, interactive displays of the company's latest technology positioned around the perimeter, screens showing highlights of the firm's meteoric rise. Janelle and Kai paused at the entrance, taking in the scene before them. The room was already filled with guests, executives in impeccable suits, women in designer gowns, servers circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played in one corner, providing sophisticated background music that didn't interfere with the buzz of conversation. Wow, Kai whispered, his eyes wide as he absorbed the opulence around him. It's like a movie. Janelle squeezed his hand reassuringly. Remember, it's just people in fancy clothes. Nothing to be nervous about. A hostess approached them with a professional smile. Good evening. May I have your names, please? Janelle Ward, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. And guest. The hostess consulted her tablet, then looked up with increased attentiveness. Ms. Ward, yes. You're on Mr. Hale's personal guest list. Welcome to the Hale Innovations annual Founders Celebration. Personal guest list. The confirmation that Dorian had specifically included her sent a flutter of nerves through Janelle's stomach. This wasn't a generic invitation sent to former associates or business contacts. This was deliberate. Intentional. "Thank you," she managed, accepting the small program the hostess offered. "Mr. Hale is currently greeting guests near the main display," the hostess added, gesturing toward the far end of the ballroom. "He mentioned he would appreciate being notified when you arrive." "That won't be necessary," Janelle said quickly. "We'll find him ourselves." The hostess nodded and moved on to the next arrivals. Janelle took a deep breath, scanning the room for Dorian. It didn't take long to locate him. He stood near a dramatic digital display, surrounded by a small group of people who listened attentively as he spoke. Even from a distance, his presence was unmistakable, tall, commanding, at ease in his position of authority. 8 years had changed him little, at least physically. His dark hair was now accented with silver at the temples, lending him an distinguished air. His posture remained impeccable, his gestures precise and controlled. He wore his success like a second skin, comfortable, natural, earned. "Is that him?" Kai asked, following her gaze. "Is that my dad?" The simple question brought Janelle back to the moment, to the purpose that had brought them here. "Yes," she confirmed softly. "That's your father." Kai stared across the room, studying the man who had contributed half his DNA yet knew nothing of his existence. "He looks like me," he said with wonder. "Or I look like him." "You do," Janelle agreed. "Very much so. Should we go talk to him now?" Kai asked, a mixture of eagerness and apprehension in his voice. Janelle considered their options. They could approach Dorian immediately, create a scene in front of his current audience. Or they could wait, allow him to finish his current conversation, perhaps find a moment of relative privacy for the revelation that would change his life forever. "Let's get something to drink first," she suggested. "Give ourselves a few minutes to get comfortable. Your father is busy right now with those people. We'll find the right moment." Kai nodded, accepting her guidance. They made their way to a refreshment table, where Janelle obtained a sparkling water for herself and a fancy lemonade for Kai. They found a relatively quiet spot near one of the interactive displays, where Kai immediately became fascinated by the technology demonstration. "This is so cool," he enthused, manipulating the holographic interface with intuitive ease. "It's like the stuff in my science books, but real." His excitement provided a welcome distraction from the confrontation that loomed before them. Janelle watched him interact with the display, noting how quickly he grasped its functionality, how his mind made connections and leapt ahead to possibilities not explicitly shown. So like his father in his intellectual curiosity, his natural affinity for technology. They moved from display to display, Kai increasingly animated as he explored the innovations showcased throughout the ballroom. His enthusiasm drew smiles from nearby guests, a few of whom commented on his precocious understanding of the technology. "Your son has quite a mind," one woman remarked to Janelle. "A future engineer, perhaps." "Perhaps," Janelle agreed, her eyes drifting once more to Dorian, who had moved to another group but still hadn't noticed their presence. "He comes by it naturally." They had been at the gala for nearly 30 minutes, working their way around the perimeter of the ballroom, when Janelle realized they could no longer delay the inevitable. Dorian had finished his current conversation and stood momentarily alone, checking something on his phone. "Kai," she said gently. "I think it's time to meet your father." Kai looked up from the display he'd been exploring, suddenly solemn. "Okay." He straightened his small shoulders, adjusted his tie in an unconscious gesture that mirrored Dorian's own habitual movement. "I'm ready." Hand in hand, they began making their way across the ballroom. The crowd seemed to part before them, or perhaps that was just Janelle's heightened awareness making the journey feel significant, ceremonial. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her palm felt sweaty against Kai's small hand. Time seemed to slow, each step bringing them closer to the moment that would change everything. They were perhaps 20 feet away when Dorian looked up from his phone. His gaze swept the room in the automatic scan of a host ensuring all is well, then stopped abruptly as he registered Janelle's presence. For a heartbeat, he simply stared, as if confirming she wasn't a figment of his imagination. Then a smile, genuine, warm, surprisingly unguarded, transformed his face. He slipped his phone into his pocket and started toward them, his focus entirely on Janelle. He hadn't noticed Kai yet. Hadn't registered the small figure beside her, partially obscured by passing guests. Was seeing only the woman he had invited, the connection to his past who had unexpectedly accepted his overture. Janelle, he said as he drew near, her name carrying a weight of history, of unresolved emotion. You came. I did, she confirmed, her voice steadier than she felt. Hello, Dorian. His eyes held hers for a moment that stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions, with 8 years of silence suddenly broken. Then, inevitably, his gaze shifted downward, to the child standing beside her. Janelle felt the exact moment recognition hit him. Saw the subtle widening of his eyes, the almost imperceptible intake of breath, the complete stillness that overtook his normally controlled movements. Watched as his focus sharpened with laser intensity on Kai's face, taking in the eyes that mirrored his own, the jawline that echoed his, the features that proclaimed their connection more clearly than any words could. The champagne flute he'd been holding slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, the sound cutting through the elegant music and polite conversation. Silence spread outward from where they stood, like ripples in a pond. Nearby guests turned to look, first at the broken glass, then at the tableau formed by Dorian, Janelle, and the child who so clearly connected them. Kai, with the directness of childhood, broke the frozen moment. Hello, he said, extending his hand as he practiced. I'm Kai. Kai Hale Ward. Dorian's gaze remained fixed on the boy's face, his expression a complex mixture of shock, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. How old are you, Kai? 7.5, Kai answered promptly. My birthday is April 12th. Dorian did the math instantly, Janelle could see it in his eyes. April 12th. Almost exactly 9 months after their relationship ended. After he had made the choice that altered both their lives irrevocably. His gaze lifted to Janelle's, 1,000 questions in his expression. But before he could voice any of them, before the private moment could continue, reality intruded in the form of his assistant, hurrying over with napkins for the spilled champagne. Mr. Hale, are you all right? Let me take care of this. I'm fine, Dorian cut her off, his voice regaining its customary authority. Please give us a moment. The assistant hesitated, clearly confused by his tone and the tension radiating from the small group. Sir, the chairman was hoping to speak with you about the announcement. Not now, Dorian said, his eyes never leaving Janelle and Kai. Tell everyone I'll be unavailable for the next few minutes. No interruptions. The finality in his voice brooked no argument. The assistant nodded and retreated, though not before casting a curious glance at Kai, her expression registering the obvious resemblance that had already caught the attention of nearby guests. Dorian seemed to become aware of the growing interest surrounding them, of the whispers beginning to circulate, of the phones discreetly raised to capture the unexpected development. With the decisiveness that had built his empire, he made a swift assessment and took action. We should continue this conversation somewhere more private, he said, his voice low and controlled despite the emotional earthquake clearly taking place beneath his composed exterior. Please, follow me. Without waiting for a response, he turned and began walking toward a side door, clearly expecting them to follow. Janelle hesitated for just a moment, then nodded to Kai. Together, they followed Dorian through the ballroom, aware of the eyes tracking their movement, the speculation already building among the assembled guests. The side door led to a small anteroom, elegantly appointed but clearly designed for private conversations away from the main event. Dorian closed the door behind them, shutting out the music and chatter of the gala. For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, the weight of unspoken truths filling the space between them. Kai, seemingly unaffected by the tension, looked around with interest. "This is a nice room," he observed. "Is it yours?" The simple question, so incongruous with the emotional magnitude of the moment, startled a brief laugh from Dorian. "No, not exactly. The hotel owns it. But I'm borrowing it for tonight." "Oh." Kai nodded, processing this information. "Mom says it's polite to compliment people's houses when you visit. I guess that applies to borrowed rooms too." "That's very thoughtful," Dorian replied, his gaze moving between Kai and Janelle with a mixture of wonder and confusion. Then, to Janelle, "He's my son." Not a question. A statement of recognition, of acceptance of the obvious truth before him. "Yes," Janelle confirmed simply. "He's your son." Dorian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty from a man known for his unshakable confidence. "Why didn't you tell me? All these years?" The question hung between them, loaded with 8 years of absence, of milestones missed, of a relationship that never had the chance to form. "It's complicated," Janelle began, acutely aware of Kai listening to every word. "And not a conversation we should have right now, with Kai present." Dorian glanced at his son. The word still foreign, surreal in his mind, and nodded his understanding. Whatever recriminations or explanations needed to happen, they would wait. The child before them deserved better than to witness adult conflict on his first meeting with his father. "You're right," he agreed, then knelt to bring himself to Kai's eye level, a gesture that surprised Janelle with its instinctive appropriateness. "Kai, I'm very glad to meet you. I'm Dorian. Your father." The words seemed to catch in his throat, heavy with meaning and responsibility he was only beginning to comprehend. Kai studied him with the serious intensity he brought to all new experiences. "I know. Mom has told me about you. She says I have your eyes and your brain." "Your mother is very observant," Dorian replied, a hint of his usual confidence returning. "You do have my eyes. And if you have my brain, you're a very lucky young man." "Mom says I'm smart like you but kind like her," Kai continued, warming to the conversation now that the initial awkwardness had passed. "She says that's a good combination." "Your mother," Dorian said, glancing up at Janelle with an expression she couldn't quite interpret, "is right about that too." He stood, his full height once again emphasizing the physical resemblance between father and son, the same tall, lean build, the same natural grace of movement. "I have a lot of questions," he said to Janelle, his voice low enough that Kai, now distracted by a painting on the wall, couldn't hear. "A lot we need to discuss." "I know," Janelle acknowledged. "And we will. But right now, there's a room full of people wondering what's happening. Your guests. Your board members. Probably some press." Dorian's expression shifted as he considered the public relations implications of what had just occurred. The CEO, the strategic thinker, reasserting control over the shocked father. "Yes. That needs to be managed. What do you want to do?" Janelle asked, genuinely uncertain of his preference. "We could leave quietly. Come back tomorrow to talk when there's less audience." Dorian considered this for a moment, then shook his head. "No. The damage, or rather, the revelation, is already done. People saw us. Saw him." He glanced at Kai, who was now examining a small sculpture with careful hands. "The resemblance is unmistakable. Leaving now would only fuel speculation and gossip. So what then? We face it directly," Dorian decided, his natural authority reasserting itself. "Together. As a family." The word hung between them, loaded with implication and possibility neither was prepared to fully address. "A family," Janelle repeated carefully. "That's a significant word, Dorian. It's the accurate one, he replied, his gaze steady on hers. Whatever else happens, whatever explanations are owed on both sides, that fact remains. The three of us are connected. Permanently. Biologically. Undeniably. Before Janelle could respond, Kai rejoined them, apparently finished with his exploration of the room's artistic offerings. "Are we going back to the party?" he asked. "I didn't get to try any of the fancy food yet." The simple request, so normal amid the emotional complexity swirling around the adults, brought a smile to both their faces. "Yes," Dorian answered, making the decision for all of them. "We're going back to the party. Together." He held out his hand to Kai, a gesture both symbolic and practical. After a brief glance at Janelle for confirmation, Kai took it, his small hand disappearing into his father's larger one. "Ready?" Dorian asked, looking from Kai to Janelle. "Ready," Kai confirmed with the resilience of childhood. Janelle nodded, recognizing that whatever came next, the public reaction, the private conversations, the reconfiguring of three separate lives into some new arrangement, they would face it together. Not as the couple they once were, not as strangers, but as two adults connected forever by the extraordinary child between them. Dorian opened the door, and together they stepped back into the ballroom. Into the light, the music, the curious gazes, and the future none of them could have anticipated when the evening began. If this emotional reunion has touched your heart, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Family connections run deeper than any secret, and sometimes the most important truths find their way to the surface exactly when they're meant to be discovered. The moment they re-entered the ballroom, Janelle felt the shift in atmosphere. The music continued, the conversations resumed, but an undercurrent of awareness, of speculation, rippled through the assembled guests. Eyes followed their progress, Dorian in the lead, Kai's hand still in his, Janelle walking beside them with carefully maintained composure. Dorian's assistant materialized at his side, her professional demeanor barely concealing her confusion and concern. "Sir, the chairman is asking." "Tell Harrison I'll speak with him shortly," Dorian interrupted smoothly. "First, I'd like you to meet someone important." He placed his free hand on Kai's shoulder, a gesture both protective and proud. "This is Kai Ward. My son." The assistant's eyes widened, her gaze moving rapidly between Dorian and Kai, noting the unmistakable resemblance. I didn't realize you had a." "Neither did I, until tonight," Dorian said with remarkable candor. "Life is full of surprises, isn't it, Jessica?" "Yes, sir," she managed, professionalism reasserting itself. "Should I prepare a statement for the press? There are several reporters here who have already noticed the resemblance." "Not yet," Dorian decided. "Let's enjoy the evening first. We'll address any questions tomorrow, with proper preparation." Jessica nodded, clearly relieved to have direction. "Of course. And shall I inform the chairman that I've just discovered I'm a father?" "Yes, I think that information might explain my temporary distraction." A hint of Dorian's dry humor surfaced, surprising Janelle with its appearance in such a charged moment. "Now, I believe my son mentioned something about wanting to try the food. Could you direct us to where the best options might be found?" "The main buffet is along the east wall," Jessica replied, adapting quickly to the unexpected situation. "The chocolate fountain has been particularly popular." "Chocolate fountain?" Kai perked up immediately. "Can we see that?" "Absolutely," Dorian agreed, allowing himself to be guided by his son's enthusiasm. "Lead the way, Jessica." As they moved through the ballroom, Janelle observed the reactions around them. Surprise. Curiosity. Rapid whispers behind hands. Phones discreetly raised to capture images of the tech CEO with his newly revealed son. The story was already spreading, would likely hit social media within minutes, would be on business news sites by morning. Yet Dorian seemed remarkably unconcerned with the sensation they were creating. His focus remained entirely on Kai, on answering his questions about the technology displays they passed, on ensuring he had access to the most appealing food options, on the simple but profound act of getting to know his son. "Do you like strawberries?" he asked as they reached the chocolate fountain. "They're excellent dipped in chocolate." "I love strawberries," Kai confirmed. "They're my favorite fruit." "Mine too," Dorian said, the simple shared preference seeming to delight him disproportionately. Janelle watched their interaction with a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that Dorian had chosen to acknowledge Kai immediately and publicly. Wonder at how naturally he seemed to be adapting to his newfound fatherhood. Apprehension about the conversations that would inevitably follow once the public moment had passed. And beneath it all, a question she wasn't yet ready to examine too closely. What did Dorian's presence in Kai's life mean for her? For the careful, independent existence she had built? For the future she had planned? Her thoughts were interrupted by the approach of an older man, distinguished, authoritative, with the bearing of someone accustomed to power. Janelle recognized him from news photos as Harrison Wells, the chairman of Hale Innovation's board of directors. "Dorian," he said, his voice carefully modulated to reveal nothing of his thoughts. "I see the rumors circulating the room are true." "Harrison," Dorian acknowledged, straightening to his full height while keeping one hand protectively on Kai's shoulder. "Yes, they are. May I introduce you to Kai Ward? My son." The chairman's gaze moved to Kai, assessing, calculating. Then to Janelle, with a flicker of recognition. "Ms. Ward. It's been some time." "Mr. Wells," Janelle replied, surprised he remembered her. "Yes, it has. This is unexpected," the chairman continued, addressing Dorian again. "The board will have questions. The shareholders will want reassurances." "About what, exactly?" Dorian's tone remained pleasant, but Janelle recognized the steel beneath it, the warning that Wells was approaching a boundary. "About stability. Continuity. The company's image." Wells glanced meaningfully at Kai, who was watching the exchange with the keen observation he brought to all adult interactions. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Dorian replied firmly. "I've just discovered I have a son. That's a personal matter, not a corporate one." "Everything about you is corporate, Dorian," Wells countered, keeping his voice low. "You know that. Your life, your image, your decisions, they all reflect on Hale Innovations. The board has a responsibility to ensure." "The board's responsibility," Dorian interrupted, his tone hardening, "is to the company's financial performance and strategic direction. Both of which are excellent, as tonight's celebration demonstrates. My personal life, including my family, is not subject to board approval or shareholder vote." The chairman seemed taken aback by the directness of Dorian's response. For a moment, tension crackled between them. The echo of a similar conflict 8 years earlier, when corporate interests had influenced personal decisions with far-reaching consequences. But this time, Dorian wasn't yielding. "Now," he continued, his voice softening slightly, "if you'll excuse us, I'm showing my son the chocolate fountain. We can discuss any legitimate business concerns tomorrow, during business hours." The dismissal was polite but unmistakable. Wells hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to being rebuffed, then nodded stiffly. "Tomorrow, then. My office, 9 a.m. "Can't make it," Dorian countered. "I have breakfast plans with my family." The chairman's lips thinned with displeasure, but he didn't argue further. With a curt nod to Janelle and a last assessing look at Kai, he moved away, already reaching for his phone, no doubt to alert other board members to the unexpected development. "Is he mad?" Kai asked once Wells was out of earshot, his perceptiveness once again surprising the adults. "Not mad," Dorian explained, kneeling to Kai's level. "Just surprised. Adults sometimes need time to adjust to unexpected news. Like you finding out you're my dad?" Kai asked with characteristic directness. Exactly like that, Dorian agreed, his expression softening as he looked at his son. Though I think I'm adjusting pretty quickly, don't you? Kai considered this seriously, studying his father's face with the careful assessment that reminded Janelle so much of Dorian himself. I think you're doing okay, he decided finally. Better than Mr. Grumpy Man. The description of the board chairman startled a genuine laugh from Dorian, a sound Janelle realized she hadn't heard in 8 years. Mr. Grumpy Man, he repeated, amusement dancing in his eyes. That's surprisingly accurate. For the next hour, they navigated the gala together. An impromptu family unit drawing curious glances and generating whispered speculation throughout the ballroom. Dorian introduced Kai to selected colleagues and associates, his pride becoming more evident with each introduction. Kai, initially shy with strangers, gradually warmed to his role as the center of attention, answering questions about his interests and schooling with growing confidence. Janelle observed their interactions with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite untangle. Relief that Dorian had embraced Kai so readily. Wonder at how naturally they seemed to connect despite having just met. Apprehension about what this new relationship would mean for the carefully structured life she had built. And beneath it all, a more complicated feeling she wasn't ready to examine, a response to seeing Dorian again after all these years, to witnessing the man he had become, to remembering the connection they had once shared. As the evening progressed, as Kai's excitement gradually gave way to the fatigue of a 7-year-old up well past his bedtime, Janelle knew it was time to bring this first encounter to a close. We should probably head back to our hotel, she said quietly to Dorian during a momentary lull. It's been an overwhelming day for everyone, especially Kai. Dorian glanced at his son, noting the drooping eyelids and slowing movements that signaled encroaching exhaustion. Of course. But where are you staying? How long will you be in San Francisco? The questions revealed his sudden fear that they might disappear again, that this brief reconnection might end as abruptly as it had begun. We're at the Bayview Hotel, Janelle assured him. We have return flights booked for Sunday afternoon. Sunday, Dorian repeated, mentally calculating. That gives us tomorrow and part of Sunday. Not much time. For what? For everything we need to discuss. For me to begin getting to know my son. His gaze was direct, intense. I'd like to see you both tomorrow. Breakfast, as I mentioned to Harrison. Then perhaps we could show Kai more of the city. The invitation, or was it a statement of intention, hung between them. Janelle recognized the significance of what Dorian was proposing, not just a private conversation to address the past, but a day spent together, the three of them, exploring what it might mean to be connected. I think Kai would like that, she said carefully. He's been excited about seeing more of San Francisco. And you? Dorian asked, his gaze steady on hers. What would you like, Janelle? The directness of the question caught her off guard. For 8 years, she had made decisions based on what was best for Kai, what was practical, what was possible within the constraints of single motherhood. What she wanted for herself had become secondary, almost forgotten. I want. She began, then paused, reformulating. I think it's important that we talk. That we figure out how to move forward in a way that's healthy for Kai. Dorian nodded, accepting her redirection to their shared priority. Agreed. Shall I send a car for you tomorrow? Around 9. That would be fine, Janelle confirmed, then turned to Kai, who was valiantly fighting to keep his eyes open. Ready to go, sweetheart? It's getting late. Kai nodded, then looked up at Dorian with sudden concern. Will I see you tomorrow? The simple question, the vulnerability behind it, seemed to touch something deep in Dorian. He knelt to Kai's level, his expression more open than Janelle had ever seen it. Absolutely, he promised. We'll spend the whole day together. I want to hear all about your school and your friends and everything you like to do. Can we ride the cable cars again? Kai asked, perking up slightly despite his fatigue. Of course, Dorian agreed immediately. And anything else you'd like to see? Kai's face lit up with a smile that transformed his features, a smile Janelle realized with a start was identical to Dorian's rare but genuine expression of unguarded happiness. Okay. That sounds good. As they prepared to leave, navigating the curious glances and whispered comments that still followed them through the ballroom, Dorian walked them to the hotel entrance. He arranged for his private car to take them back to their hotel, insisting despite Janelle's protest that a taxi would be fine. "It's late, and you're both tired," he said firmly. "Please, let me do this small thing." At the entrance, as they waited for the car to arrive, an awkward moment descended, the uncertainty of how to say goodbye after such a momentous reunion. Janelle solved it by extending her hand formally. "Thank you for understanding," she said quietly. "For handling this so gracefully." Dorian took her hand, held it perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Thank you for coming. For bringing him. For..." He glanced at Kai, who was watching a fountain in the hotel's forecourt with sleepy fascination. "For everything you've done for him. He's remarkable." "He is," Janelle agreed, a mother's pride evident in her voice. "We have a lot to talk about tomorrow," Dorian continued, his tone shifting to something more serious. "A lot to figure out." "Yes," Janelle acknowledged. "We do." The car arrived, sleek and black and undoubtedly expensive. As the driver held the door, Kai turned to Dorian with the directness of childhood. "Good night, Dad," he said, testing the word cautiously. "See you tomorrow." The simple farewell, the use of the title he had earned through biology but not yet through presence, visibly affected Dorian. For a moment, his carefully maintained composure slipped, revealing the emotional impact of this unexpected entry into fatherhood. "Good night, Kai," he replied, his voice slightly rough. "Sleep well. I'll see you in the morning." As the car pulled away from the hotel, as Kai's head gradually drooped against Janelle's shoulder, succumbing finally to the exhaustion of the day, she found herself reflecting on the evening's events. On Dorian's immediate recognition and acceptance of Kai. On his willingness to acknowledge their connection publicly, despite the corporate complications. On the natural rapport that had developed between father and son in just a few hours. It wasn't the scenario she had imagined during those anxious weeks of preparation. Wasn't the confrontation or recrimination or awkward negotiation she had steeled herself to face. Instead, it had been a beginning. Unexpected, unplanned, but perhaps exactly what all three of them needed. As they arrived at their hotel, as she gently woke Kai and guided him through the lobby, as she helped him change into pajamas and tucked him into bed, Janelle allowed herself to consider, for the first time, what Dorian's presence in their lives might mean. Not just for Kai, who deserved to know his father. But for her. For the woman who had once loved Dorian Hale enough to create a child with him. The woman who had built a life without him but had never quite managed to forget him entirely. "Mom." Kai's sleepy voice broke through her thoughts. "I like him. My dad." "I'm glad, sweetheart," Janelle replied, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "He likes you too. Very much. Do you still like him?" Kai asked, the question innocent yet penetrating to the heart of what Janelle had been avoiding. "It's complicated," she hedged. "Your father and I haven't seen each other in a very long time. We're different people now." "But you smiled at him," Kai persisted, fighting to keep his eyes open. "The real smile. Not the polite one you use with strangers." The observation, so perceptive, so typical of Kai's emotional intelligence, caught Janelle off guard. Had she smiled at Dorian that way? Had some part of her responded to him despite the years and hurt between them? "Go to sleep, Kai," she said gently, deflecting the question. "We have a big day tomorrow." "With Dad," Kai murmured, already drifting off. "Our family day." Family. The word echoed in Janelle's mind as Kai's breathing deepened into sleep. Was that what they were now? What they could become. Three people connected by biology and circumstance, by choices made 8 years ago and choices yet to be made. She didn't know. Couldn't predict what tomorrow's conversations might reveal, what path forward might emerge from the collision of past and present that had occurred tonight. But as she prepared for bed herself, as she replayed the evening's events in her mind, Janelle found herself experiencing something unexpected amid the emotional turbulence. Hope. Not for a fairy tale reconciliation or an erasing of the past. But for something new. Something that honored the truth of who they had been and who they had become. Something that put Kai at the center while allowing both his parents to find their way forward with integrity and purpose. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, necessary truths, complex negotiations about how three separate lives might become interconnected without being consumed by one another. But tonight, in the quiet of their hotel room, with her son sleeping peacefully after meeting his father for the first time, Janelle allowed herself to acknowledge what she had glimpsed in Dorian's eyes as they said goodbye. The same hope. The same uncertainty. The same recognition that while the past couldn't be changed, the future remained unwritten. And perhaps, just perhaps, it could be written together. If this story of unexpected reunions and second chances has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that remind us it's never too late for truth to emerge, for connections to be restored, for new beginnings to arise from choices we thought were final. The morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the hotel room windows as Janelle woke to find Kai already up, dressed, and practically vibrating with excitement. "Mom! It's morning. Dad will be here soon," he announced, bouncing on the edge of her bed with barely contained energy. Janelle glanced at the clock, 7:30 a.m. Dorian's car wasn't scheduled to arrive until 9. "We have plenty of time, sweetheart. Let me get dressed, and then we'll have some breakfast downstairs." "I'm not hungry," Kai declared, though his stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. "Okay, maybe a little hungry. But can we hurry? I don't want to be late." His eagerness to see Dorian again, the father he'd met just hours ago, created a complex mixture of emotions in Janelle. Joy that their initial meeting had gone so well. Concern about the intensity of Kai's immediate attachment. Apprehension about the conversations that awaited her once Kai was distracted by sightseeing. "We won't be late," she assured him, rising to begin her morning routine. "Your father said 9 o'clock, and we'll be ready." As she showered and dressed, as they ate breakfast in the hotel's casual dining room, as Kai chattered excitedly about all the things he wanted to show and tell his newly discovered father, Janelle found herself mentally preparing for the day ahead. The questions Dorian would inevitably ask. The explanations she owed him. The decisions they would need to make about how to proceed from this point forward. At precisely 8:55 a.m., the hotel house phone rang. The front desk informed Janelle that Mr. Hale's car had arrived. 5 minutes early, typical Dorian, always precisely punctual or slightly ahead of schedule. "He's here," Kai exclaimed, already heading for the door. "Come on, Mom." "Wait, let me get my purse," Janelle called, gathering her belongings with slightly less frantic energy. "And remember, walking feet in the hotel, Kai." He slowed his pace with visible effort, though his excitement remained palpable as they made their way through the lobby. Outside, a different car from the previous night awaited them, not the formal town car but a sleek silver SUV with tinted windows. And leaning against it, dressed in casual clothes that Janelle had never seen him wear during their relationship, was Dorian himself. "You came!" Kai exclaimed, his face lighting up with genuine delight. "I thought you'd just send a driver. And missed the chance to see you first thing." Dorian replied, his expression warming as he took in his son's enthusiasm. "Not a chance." He looked different in daylight, in casual attire, more approachable, less the corporate titan and more the man Janelle had glimpsed beneath the CEO facade years ago. Jeans that were obviously expensive but not flashy. A simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. Sunglasses perched atop his head rather than hiding his eyes. "Good morning," he greeted Janelle, his tone carefully neutral yet warm. "Did you both sleep well?" "Like rocks," she confirmed. Though someone was up with the sun this morning, excited about today's adventures. Dorian smiled at Kai, who was already examining the SUV with interest. "I thought this might be more practical for sightseeing than the town car," he explained. More room for a certain young explorer to see out the windows. The thoughtfulness of the choice, considering Kai's needs and interests rather than defaulting to his usual executive transportation, struck Janelle as significant. A small indication that Dorian was already adapting, already thinking like a father. "Can I sit in the back?" Kai asked, peering through the window at the spacious interior. Of course, Dorian agreed, opening the door for him. "There's a booster seat installed. The internet suggested that was appropriate for your age and height, but if it's not what you're used to." "It's perfect," Janelle assured him, touched by the research he'd clearly done overnight. "Very thoughtful." Once they were all settled in the vehicle, Kai securely buckled in the back, Janelle in the passenger seat, Dorian behind the wheel. A moment of awkward silence fell. The reality of their situation, the strangeness of this impromptu family outing after 8 years of separation, suddenly felt overwhelming. Kai, as usual, broke the tension with childish directness. "Where are we going first? Can we see the crooked street again? And the sea lions? And can we get ice cream even though it's morning?" Dorian laughed, the sound surprisingly relaxed. "I thought we might start with breakfast at a place I know near the waterfront. They make pancakes shaped like animals. Then perhaps the exploratorium. It's an interactive science museum I think you might enjoy." "Science museum?" Kai's eyes widened with interest. "With experiments and stuff?" "Lots of experiments," Dorian confirmed. "Things you can touch and test and figure out how they work." "That sounds awesome." Kai enthused. "Mom, did you hear that? A science museum." "I heard," Janelle smiled, noting how quickly Dorian had identified an activity that would appeal to Kai's interests. "It sounds perfect." As they drove through the morning traffic, as Dorian pointed out landmarks and Kai peppered him with questions about everything from how bridges stayed up to why some buildings were taller than others, Janelle observed their interaction with growing wonder. The connection between them was immediate, natural, as if the 8-year absence had somehow been bridged in the space of a few hours. Dorian answered each question with patience and detail appropriate to Kai's age, neither talking down to him nor overwhelming him with complexity. He seemed genuinely delighted by Kai's curiosity, by his quick mind, by the connections he made between concepts. "You know a lot about buildings," Kai observed as Dorian explained the engineering behind the Transamerica Pyramid. "Are you an architect too, besides being a tech person?" "No, but I considered becoming one when I was younger," Dorian replied. "I've always been interested in how things are built, whether it's structures or systems or companies." "Me too," Kai exclaimed. "I love building things. With Legos mostly, but Mom got me a real tool set for my birthday and I made a birdhouse all by myself." "Did you?" Dorian's pride was evident, though he'd had no part in the achievement. "I'd love to see it sometime." "You could come visit us," Kai suggested immediately. "Our house isn't as big as a hotel, but it's nice. And I could show you my room and my telescope and the tree fort in the backyard." The invitation, so casually offered, created another moment of tension. The first acknowledgement that their lives existed beyond this weekend, that decisions would need to be made about ongoing contact, about how Dorian would fit into the life Janelle and Kai had built 3,000 miles away. "I would like that very much," Dorian replied, his voice carefully measured. "When the time is right." His glance at Janelle through the rearview mirror conveyed his understanding that such arrangements couldn't be made unilaterally, that co-parenting would require communication and agreement between them. The restaurant Dorian had chosen was exactly as he described, a cheerful waterfront establishment known for its whimsical pancake art and spectacular views of the bay. They were seated at a window table, Kai's face lighting up as a server delivered pancakes shaped like dolphins, complete with blueberry eyes and whipped cream splashes. "This is the best breakfast ever," he declared, digging in with enthusiasm. As Kai focused on his meal, Dorian turned to Janelle, his expression shifting to something more serious. "I made some calls this morning," he said, keeping his voice low. "My PR team is preparing a statement about Kai. Nothing detailed, just acknowledging that I've recently learned I have a son and requesting privacy as we get to know each other." Janelle nodded, appreciating his directness. "That seems reasonable. The photos from last night are probably already circulating." "They are," Dorian confirmed. "My team is monitoring social media and news outlets. So far, the coverage has been surprisingly respectful, more focused on the CEO discovers son angle than on digging into details about you or Kai." "That's good," Janelle said, relieved that their privacy hadn't been completely shattered overnight. "I was worried about that. I've made it clear that any harassment of you or Kai will be met with immediate legal action," Dorian continued, his protective instinct already fully engaged. "And I've arranged for security to be available if needed, though they'll remain unobtrusive." The efficiency with which he'd addressed these practical concerns, the resources he'd mobilized overnight to protect them, reminded Janelle of the vast difference between their worlds. In her life, problems were solved through careful budgeting and personal effort. In Dorian's, teams of professionals stood ready to address any issue, to smooth any path. "Thank you," she said simply, "for thinking of that." A moment of silence fell between them, filled with the weight of all that remained unsaid. Dorian broke it first, his voice low and controlled but with an undercurrent of emotion he couldn't quite conceal. "Why didn't you tell me, Janelle? All these years. I had a right to know." The question she'd been expecting since the moment of recognition in the ballroom. The one she'd rehearsed answers for during sleepless nights leading up to this trip. "Yes, you did," she acknowledged, not evading responsibility. "And if I could go back, knowing what I know now, I might make a different choice. But at the time." She glanced at Kai, ensuring he was still absorbed in his breakfast and not listening to their adult conversation. "At the time, I made the decision I thought was best for our child." "Based on what?" Dorian pressed, though his tone remained measured. "What possible justification?" "Based on your priorities," Janelle interrupted quietly. "You made it very clear that night that your company came first. That relationships were distractions you couldn't afford. That success required singular focus. That was about us," Dorian countered, echoing his words from the previous night. "About our relationship. Not about a child. Would it really have made a difference?" Janelle challenged gently. "Would you have suddenly changed everything about who you were, about what drove you, because of an unexpected pregnancy? Or would you have tried to incorporate fatherhood into your corporate image, the CEO with the perfect family to complement his perfect success story?" The directness of her question, the accuracy with which it targeted his past priorities, seemed to give Dorian pause. He glanced at Kai, who was now chatting with a server about the process of making pancake art, then back to Janelle. "I don't know," he admitted finally, the honesty costing him visibly. "I'd like to think I would have risen to the occasion. That knowing I had a child would have shifted my perspective. But I can't say for certain." The admission, so contrary to the absolute confidence with which Dorian typically approached life, surprised Janelle. The Dorian she had known 8 years ago would have defended his hypothetical actions without hesitation, would have insisted he would have been the perfect father despite his other commitments. This Dorian, older, perhaps wiser, capable of self-reflection, was someone new to her. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "I've never spoken badly of you to Kai. He knows you're brilliant and driven and successful. Knows he has your eyes and your mind. Knows that you and I loved each other once, even if it didn't last. Thank you for that, Dorian said, genuine gratitude in his voice. For giving him a positive image of me, even in my absence. He deserved that, Janelle replied simply. Deserved to believe his father would have wanted him, would have loved him, if circumstances had been different. And now circumstances are different, Dorian said, his gaze steady on hers. Now I know about him. Now I want to be part of his life. The question is, how do we make that happen? The practical question, the one that would shape their future interactions, their shared responsibility for the extraordinary child finishing his dolphin pancakes across the table, hung between them. I don't know exactly, Janelle admitted. We live on opposite coasts. You have a company to run. I have a job, a home, a community Kai is settled in. It's not simple. Few important things are, Dorian replied. But I'm committed to finding a solution that works for all of us. Particularly for Kai. Before they could delve deeper into the logistics, Kai rejoined the conversation, having finished his breakfast and ready for the day's adventures. Can we go to the Science Museum now? The server said they have a tornado you can walk through. A tornado you can walk through? Dorian repeated, seamlessly shifting from serious co-parenting discussion to enthusiastic father. That sounds like something we definitely need to investigate. The exploratorium proved to be the perfect choice for their first full day together. The interactive science museum offered endless opportunities for Kai to explore, experiment, and demonstrate his natural curiosity. And for Dorian to witness his son's intelligence and enthusiasm firsthand. Janelle watched as they moved from exhibit to exhibit, Kai leading the way with boundless energy, Dorian following with genuine interest in his son's discoveries. They built structures together, tested principles of physics, created patterns with light and sound. Dorian never rushed Kai, never checked his phone for messages, never showed anything but complete engagement with the moment. It was a side of him Janelle had glimpsed only rarely during their relationship, the man beneath the CEO, capable of wonder and playfulness when his guard was down. Seeing it now, directed toward their son, created a complicated ache in her chest. Mom! Dad made a bubble big enough to stand inside. Kai called from across the exhibit hall, the word Dad now flowing naturally from his lips, as if Dorian had always been part of his life. Come see. As she joined them, as Dorian demonstrated the technique for creating human-sized soap bubbles, as Kai's laughter echoed through the space, Janelle found herself wondering about parallel universes, about the life that might have existed if different choices had been made 8 years ago. If she had told Dorian about the pregnancy. If he had chosen family over corporate expectations. If they had raised Kai together from the beginning. But that parallel universe remained theoretical, unknowable. This reality, this day, this moment, these three people finding their way towards some new configuration of family, was what existed. What mattered? What required their attention and care to navigate successfully? The day continued with lunch at a casual cafe near the waterfront, a promised ride on the cable cars that delighted Kai as much the second time as the first, and a visit to the Golden Gate Bridge where Dorian surprised them both with his knowledge of the structure's engineering and history. How do you know all this stuff? Kai asked, impressed by his father's explanation of how suspension bridges distributed weight. I read a lot, Dorian replied. Always have. About everything that interests me. Me too. Kai exclaimed. Mom says I'm like a sponge for facts. Your mother is right, Dorian said, glancing at Janelle with a smile that held echoes of their shared past. It's a valuable quality, being curious about the world, wanting to understand how things work. As afternoon turned to evening, as Kai's boundless energy finally began to wane after a day of exploration and excitement, they found themselves at a small park overlooking the bay. Kai had discovered a playground and was making one final burst of activity before dinner, leaving Dorian and Janelle sitting on a bench nearby, watching him navigate the climbing structure with the confidence of a child accustomed to physical challenges. He's extraordinary, Dorian said quietly. In every way. Yes, Janelle agreed. He is. You've done an amazing job with him, Dorian continued, his gaze still on Kai. He's confident, curious, kind, well-adjusted. That's your doing. The compliment, genuine, without qualification, warmed Janelle unexpectedly. Thank you. That means a lot. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, Dorian said after a moment. About the logistics. About how we make this work given our separate lives. And I think we start with regular visits. I can come to you, or you and Kai can come to me, or some combination. Video calls between visits. Consistent contact so Kai knows I'm committed to being in his life. Dorian turned to face her directly. I have resources, Janelle. Private jets, flexible schedules, homes in multiple cities. I can make this work without disrupting Kai's life or placing burdens on you. The offer was generous, practical, focused on Kai's well-being rather than Dorian's convenience. Yet something in it troubled Janelle, the ease with which he assumed money and resources could solve complex emotional challenges. It's not just about logistics, she said carefully. It's about consistency. About being present not just when it's convenient or when there's a break in your schedule. About showing up for ordinary Tuesday afternoons, not just special occasions. I understand that, Dorian replied, a hint of his old intensity returning. And I'm committed to it. To being the father Kai deserves, not just when it's easy or convenient. Even if that means disappointing your board. Missing important meetings. Putting family ahead of business sometimes. The questions weren't accusatory but genuinely seeking understanding of how Dorian envisioned balancing the demands that had once led him to end their relationship. Yes, he said without hesitation. Even then. Especially then. The certainty in his voice, the absence of qualification or condition, surprised Janelle. This wasn't the Dorian who had chosen his company over their relationship 8 years ago. This was someone who had perhaps learned, through success and solitude, what truly mattered. What changed? She asked softly. You're different now. From how you were then. Dorian was quiet for a moment, watching Kai navigate the monkey bars with determined concentration. Everything changed, he said finally. And nothing. I achieved everything I thought I wanted. Built the company. Made the billions. Became the success story everyone expected. He paused, his expression reflective. And discovered it wasn't enough. That success without connection is hollow. That achievements without someone to share them with are just entries on a resume. The admission, vulnerable, honest, stripped of the corporate polish that had once defined him, touched something in Janelle she'd thought long buried. A recognition of the man she had glimpsed beneath the ambition all those years ago. The man who might have emerged sooner under different circumstances. I'm not saying I regret my choices, Dorian continued. The company has done important work. Created technologies that matter. Provided jobs and opportunities for thousands of people. But I've come to understand there needs to be balance. That what I once saw as distractions, relationships, connections, the messy human elements of life, are actually what give the rest meaning. Before Janelle could respond, Kai called from the top of the climbing structure. Mom! Dad! Look how high I am. They both turned automatically, both called encouragement, both watched with the mixture of pride and concern that defined parenthood. In that moment, that simple, ordinary moment of shared attention to their child, something shifted between them. A recognition that whatever had happened in the past, whatever complications lay ahead, they were connected now in the most fundamental way possible. Through Kai. Through the extraordinary boy who carried both their features, both their traits, both their hopes. Through the child who had brought them back together after 8 years of silence, who had forced truth into the open, who had created the possibility of a new beginning none of them could have anticipated. As the sun began to set over San Francisco Bay, as Kai finally admitted exhaustion and joined them on the bench, leaning against Dorian's side with the easy physical affection of childhood, Janelle found herself facing a truth she hadn't expected. The future she had carefully planned, the independent life she had built for herself and Kai, was about to change in ways she couldn't fully predict or control. Because Dorian Hale was now part of their story. Not just as a biological fact or a financial resource, but as a presence. A father. A co-parent. And perhaps, though this thought remained too new and fragile to examine closely, something more. Something that acknowledged their shared history without being defined by it. That recognized the people they had become during their years apart. That allowed for the possibility of connection beyond their shared responsibility for Kai. As they walked back to the car, as they discussed dinner options and plans for their final day together before Janelle and Kai's return flight, the three of them moved with the tentative harmony of a newly formed unit, not quite a traditional family, not quite separate individuals, but something in between. Something still taking shape, still finding its boundaries and possibilities. Something that had begun with a gold-embossed invitation and a +1 that changed everything. If this story of unexpected reunions and second chances has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that remind us it's never too late for truth to emerge, for connections to be restored, for new beginnings to arise from choices we thought were final. The final day of their San Francisco visit dawned with a bittersweet quality. The excitement of one more day together tempered by the knowledge that Janelle and Kai's afternoon flight would soon separate them again. Dorian arrived at their hotel earlier than planned, as if trying to maximize every possible minute. "I thought we might have breakfast at the hotel," he suggested, "then visit the California Academy of Sciences. They have an incredible aquarium and planetarium that I think Kai would enjoy." The thoughtfulness of his planning, again centered on what would appeal to Kai rather than showcasing his own connections or status, continued to surprise and impress Janelle. This wasn't the Dorian who had once arranged experiences designed to demonstrate his wealth and influence. This was someone who had researched what a 7-year-old boy might genuinely enjoy, who had prioritized Kai's interests above all else. The morning passed in a blur of colorful fish, interactive exhibits, and a planetarium show that left Kai wide-eyed with wonder at the vastness of the universe. Throughout it all, Dorian remained fully present, answering questions, pointing out interesting details, occasionally catching Janelle's eye to share a moment of parental pride when Kai made a particularly insightful observation. It felt, in those hours, almost like the family they might have been under different circumstances. Almost like the parallel universe Janelle had wondered about the previous day. Almost like something that could, perhaps, still exist in some new form. As their departure time approached, as they shared a final lunch at a restaurant near the airport, the reality of imminent separation settled over them. Kai grew quieter, picking at his food rather than devouring it with his usual enthusiasm. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Janelle asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Kai looked up, his expression unusually solemn. "I don't want to go home yet. I want to stay with Dad longer." The simple statement, so honest in its emotion, created a moment of shared pain between the adults. Dorian reached out, placing his hand gently on Kai's shoulder. "I don't want you to leave either," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "But this isn't goodbye forever. It's just goodbye for now." "How long is for now?" Kai asked, the practical question revealing his need for concrete reassurance. Dorian glanced at Janelle, seeking her input before making promises. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to continue. "Well," Dorian said, turning back to Kai, "I was thinking I might come visit you next weekend. If that's okay with your mom, and if you'd like that." Kai's face lit up immediately. "Next weekend? Really? You'd come all the way to our house?" "Really," Dorian confirmed. "It's not so far by plane. And I'd like to see where you live, meet your friends, maybe check out that tree fort you mentioned." And my telescope. Kai added excitedly. And my school. And the beach near our house. All of it, Dorian promised. Everything you want to show me. The transformation in Kai was immediate, from subdued resignation to bubbling enthusiasm. The prospect of seeing his father again so soon, of introducing him to his everyday world, provided the reassurance he needed that this newfound relationship wouldn't disappear as suddenly as it had appeared. As they finished lunch, as they prepared for the drive to the airport, Dorian drew Janelle aside for a moment while Kai was distracted by a fish tank near the restaurant's entrance. "I meant what I said about next weekend," he said quietly. "But only if you're comfortable with it. I don't want to impose or disrupt your routines." The consideration, his acknowledgement of her authority as the parent who had raised Kai from birth, his willingness to follow her lead despite his natural tendency to take control, touched Janelle deeply. Next weekend would be fine, she assured him. Kai would love it. And it would be good for him to see that you're serious about being in his life consistently. "I am serious," Dorian said, his gaze steady on hers. "About Kai. About being his father in every way that matters, not just biologically." "I believe you," Janelle replied, and realized she meant it. The Dorian she had observed over the past 2 days, attentive, patient, fully engaged, was someone she could trust with their son's emotional well-being. Someone who understood the responsibility he had accepted by acknowledging Kai publicly and personally. "There's something else," Dorian continued, a hint of his old decisiveness returning. "Something I've been considering since yesterday." "What's that?" "I'm thinking about opening a West Coast office for Hale Innovations. In Seattle, specifically." The implication was clear, and it sent a flutter of complicated emotions through Janelle's chest. "Seattle is only a 2-hour drive from us." "Exactly," Dorian confirmed. "I could be there regularly. Could see Kai on weekends, maybe some weekdays. Could be present for school events, sports, ordinary moments. Not just special occasions." The proposal was significant, a major business decision driven by personal considerations rather than corporate strategy. The reverse of the choice he had made 8 years ago, when corporate priorities had dictated personal decisions. "That's a big move," Janelle said carefully. "Are you sure the company needs a Seattle office?" "The company could benefit from a stronger West Coast presence," Dorian replied, the businessman briefly surfacing. "But no, it's not strictly necessary from a business perspective. This would be a personal choice. A priority shift." The admission, so contrary to the Dorian who had once ended their relationship to focus on his London expansion, left Janelle momentarily speechless. "You don't need to decide anything now," Dorian continued, misinterpreting her silence as hesitation. "I just wanted you to know I'm thinking long-term. About how to be consistently present in Kai's life without disrupting the stability you've created for him." "I appreciate that," Janelle said finally. "And I think it could work. If it's what you really want." "It is," Dorian confirmed without hesitation. "He's my son. You're his mother. Being near you both isn't a sacrifice or a compromise, it's a privilege I didn't know I had until 2 days ago." The sincerity in his voice, the clarity of his commitment, eased something in Janelle that had been tense since the moment she'd decided to bring Kai to the gala. Whatever else happened between them, whatever complications lay ahead in navigating their co-parenting relationship, Dorian was fully invested in being Kai's father. Not as an afterthought or an obligation, but as a central priority in his life. The drive to the airport was subdued, Kai alternating between excitement about showing his father his world the following weekend and sadness about the immediate separation. At the departure terminal, as Dorian helped with their luggage, as the moment of goodbye approached, an awkward tension descended. "So," Dorian said, hands in his pockets, suddenly less certain than the confident CEO the world knew. "I'll make arrangements for next weekend. Let you know the details once they're confirmed." "That sounds good," Janelle agreed. "I'll make sure Kai's schedule is clear. And in the meantime, maybe we could, video chat. So Kai doesn't feel the separation too strongly. He'd like that, Janelle confirmed. Maybe tomorrow evening. After he's had a chance to settle back into our routine. Perfect, Dorian agreed, relief evident in his expression. I'll make sure my schedule is clear. The practical arrangements made, they faced the emotional reality of parting. Dorian knelt to Kai's level, his expression softening as he looked at his son. I'm going to miss you, he said simply. These past 2 days have been the best of my life. Kai launched himself forward, wrapping his arms around Dorian's neck in a fierce hug that seemed to catch his father by surprise. For a moment, Dorian appeared overwhelmed by the simple, physical expression of affection. Then his arms came around Kai, holding him close with equal intensity. I'll miss you too, Kai said, his voice muffled against Dorian's shoulder. But you're coming next weekend, right? You promised. I promised, Dorian confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. And I always keep my promises to people who matter. The assurance seemed to satisfy Kai, who finally released his grip and stepped back. Okay. But we'll video chat tomorrow too. Absolutely, Dorian agreed. I want to hear all about your flight home and what you did at school on Monday. With Kai momentarily reassured, Dorian turned to Janelle. The awkwardness between them returned, the uncertainty of how to say goodbye after such an emotionally charged weekend, after 8 years of separation suddenly bridged by their son's existence. Thank you, Dorian said finally. For bringing him to the gala. For giving me the chance to know him. For raising him to be such an extraordinary person. You're welcome, Janelle replied, meaning it sincerely. Whatever complications lay ahead, whatever adjustments their lives would require, seeing Kai with his father, seeing the immediate connection between them, the natural rapport that had developed, confirmed she had made the right decision in bringing them together. Dorian hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced her briefly, a gesture that surprised them both with its spontaneity. Safe travels, he said as he released her. I'll see you next weekend. As they made their way through security, as they settled at their gate to wait for boarding, Kai's excitement about his father's upcoming visit provided a steady stream of chatter that kept melancholy at bay. But in the quiet moments, as Kai flipped through a book Dorian had bought him at the Science Museum, Janelle found herself reflecting on the weekend's events and their implications. Her life, carefully structured, fiercely independent, built around Kai's needs and her own modest ambitions, was about to change in ways she couldn't fully predict. Dorian Hale was now a permanent part of their story. Not just as a biological fact or a distant figure, but as an active, engaged presence. A father committed to knowing his son. A co-parent she would need to communicate with, coordinate with, build trust with over time. And perhaps, something more. The thought surfaced unbidden, unexpected in its clarity. Throughout the weekend, beneath the focus on Kai and the practical arrangements of co-parenting, something else had been rekindling between them. Not the intense romance of their younger selves, but something new. Something based on who they had become during their years apart. Something that acknowledged their shared history without being defined by it. Something worth exploring, perhaps, once the initial adjustments to their new reality had settled. As their flight was called, as they boarded the plane that would carry them back to their familiar life, a life that would never be quite the same again, Janelle found herself experiencing an emotion she hadn't anticipated when she checked yes on that RSVP card and written Kai's name as her +1. Hope. Not for a fairy tale reconciliation or an erasing of past hurts. But for something authentic. Something that honored the truth of who they had been and who they had become. Something that put Kai at the center while allowing both his parents to find their way forward with integrity and purpose. The plane lifted off, carrying them away from San Francisco, away from Dorian, but not away from the connection that had been established. Not away from the future that was beginning to take shape, uncertain in its details but clear in its foundation. A foundation built not on corporate success or careful independence, but on the one thing that had brought them back together after 8 years of silence. Their son. The child with Dorian's eyes and Janelle's heart. The unexpected gift who had forced truth into the open and created the possibility of a new beginning none of them could have anticipated. As the California coastline receded beneath them, as Kai finally dozed off beside her, exhausted from the weekend's emotions and adventures, Janelle allowed herself to acknowledge what she had glimpsed in Dorian's eyes as they said goodbye, the same hope. The same uncertainty. The same recognition that while the past couldn't be changed, the future remained unwritten. And perhaps, just perhaps, it could be written together. 6 months later. The Seattle office of Hale Innovations occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise with spectacular views of Puget Sound. Unlike the sleek, somewhat sterile design of the New York headquarters, this space featured warm wood elements, living walls of plants, and comfortable gathering areas interspersed among the more traditional workstations. Dorian's private office reflected the same philosophy, professional but welcoming, designed for productivity without sacrificing humanity. Large windows showcased the water and mountains beyond. A wall of family photos, all taken within the past 6 months, provided a personal touch that would have been unthinkable in his previous workspace. Kai featured prominently in these images, building sandcastles at the beach near Janelle's home, stargazing with his telescope, proudly holding up a science fair ribbon, laughing on the tree fort Dorian had helped him expand. 6 months of weekends, school events, ordinary Tuesday afternoons, and special occasions, all captured and displayed with evident pride. And in some of the photos, Janelle appeared as well, sometimes with Kai, sometimes with both Kai and Dorian, her smile growing more natural, more unguarded as the chronology progressed. The transition hadn't been seamless. There had been adjustments, negotiations, occasional tensions as they figured out how to co-parent effectively, how to integrate Dorian into Kai's established routines, how to communicate about everything from bedtimes to educational decisions to holiday plans. But they had navigated these challenges with mutual respect and a shared commitment to Kai's well-being. Had established boundaries and expectations that honored both Janelle's years of primary parenting and Dorian's genuine desire to be fully involved in his son's life. And somewhere along the way, amid the practical arrangements and parenting discussions, something else had begun to develop between them. Not a rekindling of their former relationship, but something new. Something based on who they were now rather than who they had been 8 years ago. Something that had led, just last weekend, to Dorian joining them not just for dinner but for breakfast the following morning. To Kai's delighted observation that Dad slept over. To a conversation after Kai went to bed about taking things slowly, about being certain, about not confusing their son with promises that might not be kept. A knock at his office door interrupted Dorian's reflections. His assistant appeared with a reminder about his 3 o'clock meeting, then added, "And Ms. Ward called. She said Kai's science presentation is at 4:30, not 4 as originally scheduled." "Thank you, Jessica," Dorian replied, already adjusting his mental calendar. "Please clear my schedule from 4 onwards. This presentation is important to him." "Already done, sir," Jessica confirmed with a smile. She'd adapted quickly to her boss's new priorities, to the reality that family commitments now took precedence over even the most significant business matters. "Your car will be ready at 3:45. As she left, Dorian turned back to the window, to the view of the city where his son lived, where his future was taking shape in ways he could never have imagined 6 months ago. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. There were still questions to be answered, adjustments to be made, decisions about how 3 separate lives might become more permanently intertwined without losing what made each valuable and distinct. But the foundation was solid. Built on truth finally acknowledged. On responsibility willingly embraced. On love, for Kai, primarily, but increasingly for each other as well, that transcended past mistakes and created space for new possibilities. As Dorian prepared for his meeting, as he glanced once more at the photos that reminded him of what truly mattered, he felt something that had been missing throughout his years of corporate success and solitary achievement: contentment. Purpose beyond profit. The quiet joy of belonging to something more meaningful than any company or achievement. A family. Unconventional, still finding its way, but real. Connected not by traditional structures or societal expectations, but by choice. By commitment. By love that had found its way through 8 years of silence to create something none of them had dared to imagine. Something that began with a +1 and ended with 3 lives forever changed. If this story of unexpected reunions and second chances has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that remind us it's never too late for truth to emerge, for connections to be restored, for new beginnings to arise from choices we thought were final.